Hi, I'm Rohan. I'm a team lead in AI assurance for healthcare at the Alan Turing Institute. I also have some academic affiliations with Oxford and UCL.
Hi everyone, I'm Brad. I'm a DPhil at Oxford working in clinical AI, also a medical doctor from South Africa, work in some of the startup space, largely in large-scale machine learning and some global health stuff, largely related to infectious disease modeling in sub-Saharan Africa.
Hi, my name's Marta. I'm a senior lecturer at City St George's. I work in AI applied to medicine and also mathematical modeling and medical image analysis. And it's very nice to be here.
Hi everyone, my name is Chen, and I'm currently a lecturer at University of Sheffield and also an Alice Scholar in the Alice Institute and also affiliated with Imperial College London as an honorary research fellow. So my research area is about how to apply AI for healthcare applications, in particular cardiovascular disease, and how to improve the robustness and trustworthiness aspect. Thank you.
Hello, so my name is Tian. So I'm a principal research manager and a project lead at Microsoft Research AI for Science. So here I lead a team who is basically building foundation AI models to accelerate material discovery.
Rebecca just spoke, right? You can see the cell and then you can share the mic. Yeah, so we can go to the first question, although I know for the keynote speakers, you have covered quite some of the answers. The first question is, what does impact mean in your field, and how is it best measured, and particularly in terms of new work deployment and adoption? So because you may know that our theme of our multimodal AI committee, we are talking about more deployment-centric research, and we are talking about achieving impact. So who wants to start with this impact question?
We were actually thinking about what the definition of impact can be. I think a general definition can be some sort of measurable real-life outcome in your field, which has positive societal consequence. But so it needs to be measurable, right? So in my area, which would be health AI, at the end of the day, impact is patient outcome. Is patient's life improving? Is survival rate increasing? Things like that. Some sort of earlier impact could be, is the AI being adopted at all in clinical workflows, which is often a big barrier. So yeah, I think these are measurable outcomes in my area.
What do you foresee the time needed? Because we know clinical AI is a bit challenging. The time taken to go through those different stages. Right?
I feel that some of the time that is needed is warranted, given the high risk. The thing is, even giving it the time it needs, sometimes it doesn't get adopted. And I think that would become more challenging in the near future, because I am expecting, given the recent EU AI Act, we would have similar regulations here for particularly high-risk AI. Which would mean that it would need some sort of assurance or guarantee that it will only do what it is supposed to do within certain limits or bounds of certainty. But we can go into that more in details.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other panelists want to comment on the impact, the measure?
Maybe I can add some regarding, because I'm also working on AI for healthcare. So when talking about impact, the first question is about who will get benefit from my research, for example, and the two primary beneficiaries are the first is the patients, and I'm not sure whether anyone have been going to the A&E in NHS. Maybe you will spend hours in waiting area, right? So one of the measurable outcome for me is how to reduce the waiting time by sort of like reduce the workload of clinicians and accelerate, for example, their report time, and also reduce their medical errors And it's recently I know that in the States that actually medical errors is the top 3 killer, which is fascinatingly astonishing to me. And I hope that with AI, we can reduce these medical errors by help them to identify those misdiagnoses, and so that patient can get healthy life, or even like have high quality of life.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about materials as well. So yeah, in my view, that is pretty clear, right? So having impact means that, for example, on your hand, right, one of the batteries on your phone, right, is designed by AI. So I think to me that is kind of the impact, because in a way, a lot of the societal problem we're facing today, right? So they're really bottlenecked by finding good materials, right? So therefore, if we can really allow the kind of the industry to discover novel materials in a much faster way, this has a path to becoming part of the solution to biggest problems like climate change, etc. So in my view, that is the big impact, to having the material kind of go all the way to real world being manufactured at a very large scale. But then in order to really achieve that, I think it's about how to bridge the gap between the AI tools and being adopted in the industry. I think that will take some time, because the R&D, the materials R&D industry, the AI tools still very new to them, and there is still, as of today, right, not enough trust, not enough learning on this kind of tools. I think this is a kind of an ongoing process where the industry will begin to learn these tools, and then these tools will also iteratively improve, and then we're gonna see real kind of AI designed materials being manufactured at a larger scale, and then this will kind of drive into real world impact, where I think people will be able to see those in their hands.
Thank you, Ken. Just inspired by Chen's comments, right? So, what are the materials that matter most to the audience and people sitting here? How many of you, for example, are just asking a more critical question? How many of you are looking forward to a better battery, and in terms of what? And whether there's any other materials, for example, immediately after your keynote, there's one talking about implants. There are so many different problems, right? Then what are the problems we will create, or will also create big impact besides battery and implant and so on? Briefly, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of those. So I can give you examples, right? So one thing I mentioned in my talk is, for example, materials for carbon capture, because we are all pushing to really go to carbon zero, right, in 2050. But most projection says that given the current progress, it's very hard to really reach carbon zero without a very big kind of a carbon negative industry. And that many people believe will be some kind of a carbon capture material, but it's kind of right now bottlenecked by having a good material. And another area is, for example, grid level energy storage, because if we want to really, for example, because now we can actually produce energy based on solar in a pretty cheap rate, but the issue is that solar doesn't available 24 hours a day, so therefore you still need to use this dirty energy at evening, right? So therefore, if you can have a super cheap battery material that can scale at kind of a plant level, then this will be a key component in the future kind of a battery, in the future energy storage system, then becoming part of the electric grid. I can go on and on with a lot of these examples, but usually the people say, right, so that society is defined by materials innovations. So we go from Stone Age to Silicon Age, right? So I think a lot of these are fundamental breakthroughs and will have broad impact in many parts of society.
Tom, would you like to comment on? I guess engineering biology may be also part of the solutions.
Yeah, potentially. I think so. We've heard a lot about, like, obviously there are ways you can measure impact, like economically, all those sorts of things. But I think one of the things that real impacts have is that they transform how we do things. So some of the approaches that you spoke about, and the issue there is, like, in terms of how you end up fostering that, is that it's very, very hard to predict what is going to be impactful or not when you're actually at the bench. And kind of the best example from my field I can give is CRISPR. Like, CRISPR is not a gene editing technology; it's a bacterial defense system. But we've found that it has all these extra things that we can do with it that have opened up things that didn't exist before. So I think one of the things that's really key to ensuring long-term impact is supporting diverse approaches, ways of doing things, to make sure that things that may on the surface not look that impactful, but there might be a kernel there of something that's really important for transforming how we do things, and getting that balance right. So exploiting what we know works, and maybe things that we're less sure about is really, really important.
I wanted to take that thread and link impact to creativity, and impact comes most often as an annoying box to fill when you're writing a grant. But I think it can be seen as an invitation to creativity. It's only so easy to replicate and change slightly what you or other people have already done. But if you focus on impact and on really making things happen, then you change that perspective to being more creative, think, I want this end result, how can I achieve it? Are there other pathways for doing that? And I think that links well to the serendipity to some extent that you were discussing now, as bringing impact into to fostering an open-minded way on how to reach that. And I just want to make the point that beyond this very functional definition of impact, we also have impact in other ways that are not linked to research outputs, such as the way we interact with other people and the culture we foster at work and elsewhere. And that's another pathway to impact that doesn't make it to those boxes in the grants sometimes, but it's also interesting to bear in mind, I think.
Thank you very much for the comments. I think recently I listened to David Baker's Nobel composition, and he was asked about the question of impact. He didn't think. He think one of the biggest impact he made is the people he had trained, because he said in the Nobel Prize, right, so he got 200 people over there to celebrate. He all from his lab celebrated with him. He got 60 of his students or people from his lab have faculty positions around the world. He considered that kind of mentoring. Therefore, I think I was curious, because when we went to SMB Liverpool for a conference, we thought we will be able to see this great guy over there, but actually he has a zero travel policy. He said the only travel he made after the announcement of the prize, Nobel Prize, is to receive the prize. There's no more travel. He said, if I leave for 1 day, I may miss 10 one-on-one meetings with my students. That's some also, as particularly as we as academics, right? So we naturally, that's also one of the biggest impact that we may be able to make.
No, I think carrying on with the trend about discussing sort of new ways of driving impact, or where the frontier is, I think one of the interesting things that has come out of some of the work in sub-Saharan Africa is that this idea of taking large language models, trying to use them to counsel people on diseases, accessing people that previously can't access healthcare. And I think the challenge that comes out of that is that there's a big question about the impact that has, but the comparator is oftentimes there's nothing there, or there's no like other thing that you're comparing to. And so it's asked a lot of questions about where the frontiers of where you can measure impact are. And I think there's so many interesting avenues that are coming out with new pieces of technology, specifically large language models, but other forms of AI systems where you can access people that have never been accessed before. There's maybe not necessarily an easy way of proving or showing impact, but there's also interesting ways this technology makes it easier for us to monitor things or to engage and sort of evaluate things that have never been evaluated before. And so things like being able to evaluate people for mental health in a way that is actually giving a good representation. One of the big issues with any of these population evaluation metrics is the current way we do it is kind of terrible. We use these checklist surveys which are validated for going like in one specific area. And so we've opened up these entire new ways of not only impacting more people or engaging more people, but also just monitoring for completely more personalized or more improved ways. Like if you can have an LLM that monitors like your continuous engagement or continuous conversational data, you get a much richer, more nuanced view of where someone is, both for their disease or for like their entire health spectrum. And so not only is this better ways of engaging and potentially making more difference in people's lives, but it's also ways that we can actually monitor impacts that we couldn't do it in a way that was probably justifiable before.
Yeah, that's really, maybe you can move on to the next question, which is where are the most significant opportunities for multimodal AI to achieve societal benefits in the next 5 years? And what barriers must be overcome in order to achieve deployment? Anyone want to comment on it? What will be the opportunities in multimodal AI that can achieve benefits in the next 5 years, and what are the barriers for that? Yeah, sure.
Most of my work is multimodal AI for cancer, especially cancer diagnosis, prognosis, therapy selection. Opportunities are as we get different modalities of data to investigate what information is shared between them, and can some predictions which are usually done with more expensive modalities of data be linked to less expensive ones, cross-modal? Yeah, for economic benefit, but also for triaging on whether to go for more expensive data for a particular patient. So also using that to gradually move towards more personalized predictions. But then that brings its own challenges with respect to distributed data. So you might need federated learning, but then the data might be distributed across NHS trusts with different types of data quality. There might be missing data. The data might be missing just because of the clinical workflows. Because, for example, for cancer, radiology is often used for screening, but then only a subpopulation of that would go for biopsy, and even less for, say, genetic tests. So that is not exactly missing data. We call it a funneling or a pyramid effect, depending on which way you are looking at it. Is the data being incorporated into the established clinical workflows? We talk about clinician in the loop, but is the AI in the clinical loop? We have multidisciplinary team meetings to make decisions on particularly difficult cases. Will the AI actually be integrated into that system, or it would be standalone?
Do you think it will take 5 years to reach there, or like?
Well, all my predictions have actually come true before I thought they would. So maybe it is 5 years. I would have said 10, but who knows? I mean, the things are moving much faster than I thought. Yeah. So.
I think I'll just yes and that. I think health is quite represented. I think we'll talk. I think that's very much true. I think one of the key things that's the uncomfortable truth of healthcare is that there's a lot of movement in terms of specific work for very specific diseases, but most of the impact is in the systems. Making something that has a 1% improvement in primary care and for large amounts of referral systems in the NHS or in any of the larger health systems will probably have a bigger societal impact than improving ICU care or improving like ICU mortality models just because of the numbers of people that it can impact. The problem is figuring out how to leverage all the modalities of data that is captured around someone's health journey, being able to do that in a way that can be useful right at the starts of care before we start putting them into very expensive processes to move them through the health system, and being able to figure out ways of flexibly collecting data as that is useful to their clinical journey. I think figuring out how to do this in a way that respects the trajectories of cares that people have is also critically important, because if we can figure out where we can not only personalize, but where's the most impactful time to actually collect data, or where's the most impactful time to make an intervention as early as possible, we prevent them even moving into the places where we have dense data capture, which will be like the hospitals and other kinds of systems. The big challenges here is that you're dealing with mass amounts of missing data, very unequally sampled pieces of data, and you're dealing with timescales that are quite substantial. It's easy to work in hospital-grade environments because the outcome is very closely related to where the data is captured, but the biggest impacts are going to be made in spaces where the outcome may be years separated, but you can actually prevent the thing from happening. And so we're going to have to get better at leveraging just massive amounts of sparse data that covers multimodalities, but also across very large timescales, which exposes you to quite a lot of noise. And I think being able to work in that space, it's probably going to require some bureaucratic movement to try and link things through trusts and through like primary care to other kinds of outcomes. But if you can do that, I think there's a tremendous impact that is possible, because you can actually make a lot of the decisions earlier, and that'll prevent a lot of expenditure and cost later on.
Are you working in that direction?
That is what I'm currently working on.
Any others?
So I think I agree that with multimodal AI, basically you get a chance to better understand the patient's health conditions, because you have all sorts of different data, images, signals, EHR. And one of the recent, apart from that, is one of the recent interesting direction is about how to integrate large language models into these tools. And however, I think while people believe that using large language model can help to reason about how AI is making decision, it also poses some risks because we know large language model, they have some hallucination problems. So for example, one of our recent work is trying to perform some red teaming, which is basically trying to review the fragility as well as the weakness of large language models, where you find that those models are easily to get attacked. And expect a bit like racial biases. For example, if you prompt the LLM with a bit like background information changing from different racial information, it will give you a different answer. And one of the recent news is that one patient just followed the advice from the ChatGPT and died because the decision from the LLM is not good, it's not right. So I think the future direction would be how we could ensure building like responsible AI models by really encouraging human and AI collaboration rather than just over-rely on a multimodal AI itself. So I think one of our interest topic is about human-centered AI with the chance of multimodal data.
Yeah, and that touched on one of the second keynote today, right? About also the lack of involvement of social science researchers, right? So I think none of us. I think today I asked the question, who are? Maybe I ask another question, who has worked with social science researchers? You raise up your hand. That's great, right? So you look like, you also work with social science. I'm very curious, right? So what kind of, how can you share some experience over here? Along the direction of the opportunities and barriers.
Yeah, so I think the interactions I've had have been trying to imagine more around imagining futures that don't exist. So there are kind of near-term things that you can see as applications of some of the technologies that we're building, but keeping an open mind to some of the longer-term things and the social impacts that they potentially can have is kind of proactively is the kind of thing that we've often done with sort of social scientists and things like that. I think is very, very important because as a scientist, like I love the areas of science that I'm studying, but it means you end up being quite blinkered to the outside world sometimes, which is a bad thing in my view. And so it is. I think it's just giving you another perspective. It's helping you think in a different way or see things in a different way. And I think that's something that I struggle as a scientist in doing. But social scientists actually are very good at kind of pulling that out of you sometimes or helping you do that.
In this sense, I think we have failed because we were not able to get any social science researchers on the panel because Maria has to leave, and she's the only one here. That's why I think next time we should really manage to invite more civil science researchers and hopefully can share some insights. Any other panelists want to comment?
Yeah, I can go. I go to a very, very different direction since a lot of the researchers here are from healthcare space. So in my field, right, so I think one of the biggest opportunity people have kind of identified is this kind of this ability to generate large scale quantum mechanical simulated data and then distill that data into a machine learning model, which can run orders of magnitude faster than the quantum mechanical calculations. So I kind of mentioned a bit that in the talk, right, which is the medicine, which is basically because a lot of the physical laws we already know, the Schrödinger equation we already know, it just takes many, many hours to compute them. But once you have those data, you can distill that into a machine learning model. Then you can run simulations 3 to 5 orders of magnitude faster. This has, in the field, lead into large-scale kind of foundation models that can do the type of simulations that normally would require maybe a year to do, to just maybe a couple of days, which is very significant and unlocked many kind of simulations that are really important to both material science, chemistry, etc. So that you can do these things now very, very easily because of the existence of these large-scale kind of foundation models. And I think that's quite a good thing because it's quite scalable, because you can actually generate in this data just with more compute. And people have seen clear scaling laws that this model becoming better and better, and people in the industry, they're pushing for those. So yeah, I see this one of the biggest opportunity in the field, where to build up this kind of foundational layer models and really enable kind of broad chemistry and materials simulations with very high accuracy across the board.
That reminds of me, I think the UKI has identified the three, right? So top, more like revolutionary integrated engineering, biology, AI, and quantum. We have another survey, like how many of you are using or work with quantum computing? You raise your hand? You work with that. So Tian, what do you think? Do you think that the quantum computing will spread like AI, like 5 years ago, we will have like more hands show up, like people, or that's just for those like rich organizations or those like very frontier organizations will have access or use the quantum computing, and how about the researchers sitting over here? Will become one of our tools in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, just disclaimer, I'm not a quantum expert. I know this is a field that some people say is 5 years away, some people say it's like, some people say it's 20 years away, some people say it's 5 years away. So it's very big divergence in there. So, maybe I'll say 2 or 3 points. Maybe the first point is that even today, if the people in here, they're interested, you can already have access to a quantum computer. You can have access that via one of the major cloud providers, they have because they're trying to let people use it. It's not that powerful quantum computer, but you can do research on top of it. You can already do it today. So that's the first point. And the second point is that one of the most early applications of quantum computer will be simulating molecules and materials, because these are quantum systems. This is the most natural places where quantum computers will be first applied. And I wouldn't be able to give an accurate timeline. Some people say it's maybe a couple of years away. Some people say it's 5 years away. It's something that is closest with what we are today. And in terms of more like general usable quantum computer, I think many people I heard of, it's further away, maybe 10 years. Yeah.
I wanted to pick up your point. I think AI as a scientist and AI as a designer of AI, looking at the impact that you asked about and think would be a great force multiplier. And that's to me, that's one of the most exciting avenues that we've been describing reality using, I'm a physicist, using mathematical equations for years, and now we can do it based on data using models that we can't write mathematically, but have opened up so much to us. For my particular research interest, if you can marry these two views of reality and build upon them, then God knows what we'll be able to find out. So that's one of the avenues I'm most excited about. And using AI beyond data analysis to really finding knowledge from them. And don't ask me on the details of that, but that's something that I think would be really interesting. And another parallel aspect would be AI as a designer of models, if we can get to that stage. I know it seems a bit scary, but a bit like an advanced meta-learning where we can use it as a force multiplier for this, and then all the ethical concerns that we were discussing earlier at this stage would obviously multiply exponentially. But that's a very exciting avenue, I think, and just to finalize the idea of AI as a source of data that you touched upon as with simulations and also with synthetic data would also be a very good way to address some of the limitations in data, if possible, that we've been discussing as well. So I think all of this is full of opportunities as well.
Take on that kind of therapy tool, right? So I think maybe we need to take a distributed approach and right collectively to try to overcome that barrier, so everybody do a little bit of that. And of course, we need to think about how to do that. And that's more like your swarm, right? So how can we get a little bit from everybody or many people to get that data problem? It's really also our biggest headache for your researchers. Thank you very much for your comments, Rebecca. Any other comments before we close this for this question? It looks like we were told that we have to leave by 5. It looks like nobody's kicking us out. So I will take advantage of that because we take over our conservatory, which actually we booked for up to 5. So maybe we can, until they kick us out, right? So we can take some questions from the audience to our panelists. Anyone want to ask any panelist or any question? But we need to do that briefly, right? So that we can maximize the benefit and the time we have still from our weekend.
Hi, I have a question regarding, sorry, I'm terrible with names and I've forgotten yours, but yours was the last keynote session. Basically, when you were discussing how you have a cell and you're trying to map genomes, like what phenotype will be expressed by what genotype, and I'm sorry, my question is extremely simplistic. I could probably just Google this, but to me it sounded kind of like what you were trying to do was defuse a bomb by cutting every wire until it blew up. So is that what's going on, or am I misunderstanding it?
I'm not quite. It's definitely, there's no bombs involved, thankfully. but I don't know. Maybe we've not got to that yet. But it's more around, I guess. You've got this massive design space. You've got to have all these options, and you just don't know necessarily what each of those options does, and it's just a way of effectively measuring what the function of each of those specific designs is. And obviously, I think what you're getting at maybe is you're looking for something in there. So typically, when these experiments are done, they're not really looking for anything. What they want to actually have as an outcome are a whole range of different functions that they then can use as effectively like a library that they can look up and just pick the sequence which has the function that they want. So actually, they don't just want a single thing. They want as many different kind of functionalities as they could have.
Thank you, Tom. Can we focus the question based on our topic, really conducting impactful research, right? I think one can convert that into a keynote, like a Q&A. So yeah, can we focus the question on how to conduct impactful research?
So my question is related to impact of AI in healthcare. So what we usually claim or try to, when we try to sell AI in healthcare is like claiming the impact that it will reduce the workload perhaps, or reduce the, improve the patient handling. But we also know that we also educate for, you know, human in the loop AI or doctors in the loop AI. So if the AI is going to make the decision, but the doctor has to anyways cross-check that. So are we developing AI to reduce the workload of the doctor, or is it going to further add the to the workload of the doctor? And this is something that we usually like kind of like face as a criticism from.
That's a very good question, right? So we often invent technology, then I think often we see the word that we are actually controlled by become, right? So anyone want to comment on that perspective? Like become slave of technology?
No, and I mean, I think this is not true for just AI. Like the reality is improving healthcare is not just a case of solving one problem. Oftentimes, healthcare is littered with tons and tons of evidence that you go and solve this one part, it's great, you just break the problem one step down the line. You increase patient throughput here 30 times, you actually break the system down the line because now this has got 30 times the capacity than it's actually built for. I think there's two answers to this. The one is, in healthcare, the answer is you have to think around systems, not around individual problems. It's oftentimes thinking about why a specific problem exists. That's the way that you actually are going to drive impact by, and like finding some process that you can improve, not just focusing on like a specific part of that process or specific part of a flow. In terms of actually automating the clinical work, I think that the most impactful things to do in health are seldom automating like individual medical decisions. It's oftentimes making sure that doctors have the capacity to make decisions where they matter. There's a lot of talk at the moment of AI scribes and things trying to make consultations 10% faster. That's not going to dress up the like gaping hole that's in the NHS or in most primary care systems. What's a much more impactful question is, why is a patient in front of a doctor in the first place? Is there a better way to route them? Is there a better way to organize staffing to prevent burnout? I think big challenges about automating medical decisions are probably going to be stonewalled largely by regulation and about more about culpability than they are probably going to be about the technology. You probably can make a lot of technology that can predict or make clinical decisions. The limitation there is probably going to be whether they're allowed to or whether the regulators allow it. But broadly speaking, I think you're going to get tremendous more impact by focusing on moving things around in these systems than you are by focusing on specifically automating one type of clinical decision.
I have a question.
Take one last
I have a question.
one
Yeah.
last question.
So, like for both of the questions from here, so I feel like most of the answers are more like for development countries. So, how about the multi-international countries, like underdeveloped countries, like Lima, lower income countries? So, what will be the role for this impact of the AI? Because like the impacts are different in different countries because of the economy system. And recently I heard lots of things that people are making AI's models and everything like in this like development countries, and mostly the testings are happening like under development countries. If you like say, so what will be the impacts and the significant opportunities of this multimodal AI in this like underdeveloped countries? Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in my field, one of the real interests around kind of biomanufacturing and producing stuff, so getting cells to act like little factories. And I think the kind of the multimodal AI aspect is making some of those processes economically viable so that anyone can actually use them. And the beauty of kind of biomanufacturing often is it can be done in a distributed way. So you're not necessarily dependent on a single factory in one place. It can be literally a small scale fermenter in someone's house. So like I think there are opportunities to support other technologies that could democratize some of the things that at least in my field that are being developed.
If if I can add to that later, just very quickly. I think one of the great promises of AI is as a leveling play field. So it takes the knowledge that is experts right now and opens it up so that anyone could access it in theory at the click of a button. You see that in education. Now you can have tutoring from an AI, whereas before you had to pay a very expensive tutor for a vaguely similar role. So I think one of the great opportunities of AI is democratizing this access to agents, if you want to call them that, of knowledge, of domain expert that used to be confined. But for that, we need to take into account, particularly in healthcare, that people are different all over the world and across all species, and make sure that we're not just training on data that pertains to a very specific geographical location where it's probably easier to get it, and that we make sure that fairness and unbiased data is used for that as well. So that's another side of this coin. But I see one of the great opportunities of AI to be an opening up a leveling field across the world, and minimizing some of these inequalities as a consequence.
I mean, it also is a bit of a contradiction in that a lot of the developing world is seeing a faster uptake of this technology than the developed world. Uganda has has a more substantial AI imaging deployment in most of their hospital systems than probably most of the European environments. There's a reason OpenAI evaluated their clinical decision support tools in Kenya. The reality is that a lot of the opportunity spaces to make the biggest difference are in these more developing spaces. They don't have 40 years of burden from digital health systems that have gone through multiple iterations. They can build these things sort of from the ground up to focus on the lessons that have been learned through these processes. Much of the solutions that are being developed and proposed in the developed world are plastering over the problems that we already have inherited from the digital burdens and burnouts that these systems have. So while I think there's definitely big issues of equity, big issues of data governance, there's big issues of if you ask any LLM for guidance around the disease and you mention the patient's got HIV, it pretty much gives you completely nonsense answers comparative to what you would know if you're working in the country. But there are tremendous opportunities to actually scale development in these places because you can build on 40 years of learnings from the developed world plus new technology. And that's why, I mean, at the moment, Africa is sort of turning into a bit of a test bed for AI solutioning and is seeing quite a lot of uptake that the rest of the world is not seeing yet.
Thank you.
Last comments? No more questions from the audience. Right? So any last comments from the panel? If not, you want to last comment?
I can add something, a specific example maybe. So one of the projects I'm involved with is looking at whether there can be a transfer of AI models trained on skin cancer images to oral cancer. And there is obviously a clear geographical divide there, skin cancer being more prevalent in the global north and oral cancer in the global south. So that's just an example of these kind of, international and cross-population AI deployment.
Shall we stop here? And let's thank the panelists very much for their input.